tourist and a resident in Spanish territory. Good afternoon, Raquel.
Yes, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Are you?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Yes, very confusing sometimes for people. The differences as far as legal things are concerned, sort of like what is a tourist, the legal stay in Spanish territory, for instance, between tourists and residents.
Yes, it's a very confusing subject, and many people ask whether they are staying legally in Spain or they're not legal. The thing is, there's no control anymore for a long time. So any European Union member or non-European Union, there's a few differences in there. And for the European Union, for example, the passport is not stamped anymore. Mm-hmm. The non-European Union, the procedure they need to stay in Spain is completely different. They need a special visado, which is applied in the Spanish consulate, whether they do reside. Now, legally, how long you can stay in Spain for European Union and non-European members alike? The maximum they stay legally in Spain, it's 90 days. So after that, they should apply for a residencia. Mm-hmm. Now, the residencia is not as such anymore, so the police station, they don't issue anymore any residencia cards. Substituting that, they will provide a certificate of registration confirming that a European Union member is residing in Spain. This certificate is like a paper, like an A4, and also contains the ANI number. Mm-hmm. Which is necessary for any registration in Spain, any official registration, any bank, anything you do in Spain, any transaction, even opening a bank account, you will need this NI number. So what is the legal stay for a member, for a European Union member? And non-European is exactly 90 days. And
because there's no actual photographic ID now with the residencia, I presume you do have to carry something, a photograph that's maybe your driving license or your passport that proves who you are.
Yes, especially when you make the payments with credit cards, you have to show your passport or your driving license. But the NI number, which is a very common question as well, the NI number, they do apply in Spain for, as I said, for opening bank accounts, for doing any transaction, will not be sufficient. Mm-hmm. Any payment with credit card or any justification of the ID, the identity, will be with passport or driving license.
Okay, okay. And tax advantages is something of importance for residents, isn't it?
Yes, it is very important, it is. Now, all the advantages that used to have all the European Union members as tourists, they have disappeared, more of them. Mm-hmm. Actually, there are no advantages for tourists to remain as a tourist in Spain. There are a few things that people have to take into account. Obviously, they will have to speak to their own accountant in their own country whether it will be an advantage, a full advantage for them to be residing in Spain. But there are a few advantages that I'm going to mention. If you are, first one, if you are, for example, over 65 years old of age and you have a main resident in Spain and you kept your property for 3 years, you will not have to pay any capital gain tax in case you sell your property. The second one will be if your residence in Spain is your main residence, you are not liable to pay the non-resident income tax every year, which is once a year, that for a property of more or less 200,000 can be 600 euros per each person, per each title holder. Mm-hmm. There is another advantage, a third one, which is normally a non-resident vendor has to have withheld 3% of the total purchase price. And this money has to be deposited with the local tax authorities, and which will not be liable to pay if they are resident in Spain. Mm-hmm. The fourth one I'm going to mention is the inheritance tax, which is a big issue for non-residents.
Yes,
because, I mean, giving figures an example, for a property of 300,000 euros, for a estate that you can inherit for 300,000 euros, you can end up paying 60,000 euros as inheritance tax. So if you are leaving your assets to your surviving spouse and children, because the Spanish government protects very much the family, they will have a reduction of up to 95%, which means that they end up paying very little inheritance tax, considering that they are resident and also the inheritors are residents. So there are a few advantages in there. Also, people must know that even they're not controlled anymore and their passport are not stamped, if they remain non-resident in Spain and they stay longer than 183 days, they are violating the law. They are staying illegally in Spain, in Spanish territory, and they can be fined up to 300 euros, which is not a lot, but it can be a problem because they set up a record in the tax authorities. Right. So people must know that maximum is three months. If they got the situation very clear, that they're going to end up living in Spain or retiring in Spain, they should get prepared to become resident in order to enjoy all these advantages that I mentioned. In case they sell, we should never know, because the financial situation can vary a lot from one year to the other. And also, if they do stay and if they don't need to sell, also to be prepared to face the inheritance tax payment for the future. So it's all advantages actually, and the tourist advantage disappeared completely. Okay, and as far as non-European citizens are concerned, how do they apply for their residence permit? Well, there are two different things. One thing is to apply for residencia if they're not going to be working in Spain, and different is to apply residencia with work permit. The residencia has to be always applied, independently of go without the work permit or not. It's a completely different story. Non-European Union members, firstly, depending on the nationality, it's difficult to obtain the residence and the work permit. And secondly, they are going to be requested a huge list of documents. Like, for example, the main thing is they have to prove they have got a place to live. Like they have rented a property or they have bought a property. There will be a requested criminal record certificate. There will be requested bank account certificate confirming they got a certain amount of money in the bank account. They have to, well, if they got children with them, or the surviving, the spouse was accompanying the person, the applicant, also has to have certain financial situation. So it's not very easy. The process is much more complicated, and prior to that, they need to obtain what I've mentioned before, the visado in the Spanish consulate in the country, which has to be issued by the country they do live. Okay. And there is a long process, and it's more complicated than obviously being European Union member. Yeah, I can imagine. Has a completely different treatment. And can you explain the Spanish imputed income tax, how that works? Yes. Well, all those that they remain non-resident in Spain, especially because, as I said, you cannot really be fiscally resident in two countries at the same time, which is also quite confusing for certain people. You can be resident in Spain, right? But you can be non-fiscally resident. So one thing is to be resident as, like, for example, being raised in the town hall and be living here for a certain amount of time, a year, but not necessarily means that you declare your taxes in Spain. So the moment you don't declare your taxes in Spain and you're not registered with the tax authorities, it means that you're not fiscally resident, because obviously you are declaring your income and your taxes in a different country. So it's two separate things, completely two separate things. So all those that they are not fiscally resident in Spain, the law says that having a Spanish property, they're liable to pay the income tax for the property they have as a second home, not as a main resident. Before, it used to be wealth and income tax. The wealth tax was based on the cadastral value of the property, which is the value assigned by the town hall. That was abolished in 2007. So people must know this, because it's also an inquiry I've got very often. Wealth tax disappeared in 2007. That was the last year. So actually 2008 was the last year to file the wealth tax, because it's 1 year, you pay the tax 1 year after 1 year that is due. And normally the wealth and income tax, they are payable from January to December. The tax year in Spain is from January to December. It's not like another country, like for example in England, it is April to April. So the income tax, how much someone will have to pay as an income tax remaining as a non-resident in Spain and being a property holder, depending on the value of the property. Normally it's 2% of the 25% of the cadastral value of the property. But I'm not going to explain the calculation because it's a little bit complicated, but I can give an example that for a property of 200,000 they will have to pay between 500 and 650 per year. So, and that goes without any doubt. You can maybe not pay and you can get away with it, but if you are catch up, then you will have to pay a surcharge to the tax authorities.
Yes. And
that's you know,
that's up
it's
to
important
each
that
council.
they have to know. Also, if you sell, they also can claim when the capital gain tax is paid from the 3% retention. They can claim the money you never paid as an income tax or wealth tax, depending on how many years you have been the owner of the property, if you never did it. So actually, if you are entitled to be refunded part of your retention, they will apply that to that retention, and they will keep the money for the income and for the income tax and the wealth tax. So it's not easy to get away with it.
No, best just to pay.
Yeah, better you pay. Yeah.
And are there any new laws that we should be aware of from the Spanish inland revenue? Because things change quite often, don't they?
Yeah, well, things, especially in the legal matters, there's always new laws coming up, depending on the situation. But lately I have had a few cases, different cases that I never actually seen it before. Like I had the other day a lady who came to my office who said that the inland revenue in England have put an embargo on her Spanish property. So actually, because they are applying this new law, now there's no limitation as it used to be before in trying to claim a debt from the debtor. Now, more than ever, inland revenue within European Union countries are working very much together to try and get paid from any debt. It can be from Social Security, it can be from the inland revenue, it can be from any debt contracted in another country. As I said, within European Union members, countries from the European Union. So this lady actually was claimed that she didn't pay or she didn't file the tax return in England for 4 years, and they put an embargo on her Spanish property. She couldn't find her because she was not anymore domiciled in the UK, but they, in the system, because now there are this new law, one of the things that this new law establishes is that there's no limitation to provide information within European Union countries. So they found out in the system that this lady had a property in Spain, and directly they put an embargo. Actually, if she doesn't pay, normally what happens is the property is taken into an auction. An auction, yes. So she can lose it completely. Yeah. And the debt was was more or less 34,000 euros.
Oh my goodness.
So actually you can lose your property, which maybe is worth 200,000 for 34,000 euros, if you're not aware. So that is also applicable to any debt contracted with the Social Security if you haven't paid, or any debt for the income tax or the wealth tax. If they found out, and it doesn't matter. Sometimes it depends on how quick they find the information, but they are now in motion, and they're very active now and trying to get paid instead of trying to keep the property or try to just forget the debt, or because especially now with banks, for example, mortgages in the past, when they were not paid, they left it like that. there is a legal subject which is the acción en pago. The banks used to keep the property and then used to just cancel the debt. But now, because there are so many debtors with mortgages, they're not interested in keeping the property anymore. So they are crossing their frontiers and they are trying to get paid, whether they not get paid in Spain, and I'm talking about Spanish bank, try to go to the country of origin of the debtor and try to get paid, whether it's through bank accounts, properties or assets or insurance or even pensions that to be cash. They will find a way, because they are collaborating in a very deep way about getting paid, and they will find a way about getting the money in cash, or cash any assets that the debtor has. So they're taking that very seriously. I think people have to be aware that, and they have to stop thinking that because I'm not Spanish, I only have a property there, or I'm rented, or they can get away with it. Now they're getting very serious about it, and they're trying to get paid.
Yes, yeah, quite rightly.